Okay, in this video I'm going to be installing AccuSQL 2016. I'll then open it to a native database. It'll open up to a tutoring sample database running natively non-SQL Server mode, at which point I'll go to database and I'll create a blank database in SQL Server and then point my SQL Server to that and then ultimately connect to it. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is go to the folder where I have the installer. It'd be AccuSQL 2016 dist. In that folder, look for a file called setup.exe and go ahead and run that. That'll launch the installer. And click Next. Read the license agreement and click Accept. Click Next. And you can put in your user and organization if you'd like. Click Next. And I would recommend the default installation folder, which is C program files or program files x86 if it's a 64-bit PC / AccuSQL 2016. Click Next. I would also recommend installing for anyone who uses the computer. And then the installer will start. Okay, now the installer is complete. I'm not showing my desktop icons, but you would have an AccuSQL 2016 shortcut on your desktop you can launch. Also, it'll be available from the Start menu in Windows. I'll just go ahead and click Launch the program, leave that selected, and click Finish. So now you'll notice it's going to open out some files real quickly, and I'll talk about those in a second. And then it'll ask for your activation key. You get that with your software, but if for some reason you don't have it, you can contact us here and we'll send it to you. So click Yes, and then enter your activation key. And then the software will open. Okay, now I'll log in with an admin ID and password. The default login is 91, so 111111111. Press enter, and the password is all caps NEW. Press enter, and it'll warn me that I'm using the default ID and password. It recommends I change it, which is fine. Okay, and now AccuSQL 2016 is open. Now look at the bottom. It says you are not connected to a SQL Server database yet. Now, one thing I'd like to mention is if this is a brand new install on a PC that's never had any version of AccuSQL on it, you may need to install the native SQL Server connectivity client. Okay. Now to do that, go to the folder where AccuSQL is installed. In this case, it's C program files x86, AccuSQL 2016, right here. And in that folder set, I have a folder called SQL drivers. Okay. Now there's two different installers for the native SQL connectivity client. SQLN CLI is a 32-bit PC installer, and then I have an x64. So I think I already have it installed, but I can run through it anyway. So you would go ahead and double-click that to launch the installer. Click Next, and I do already have it installed, but I'll go ahead and go through Modify. I do not need the SDK, and I'll just accept the defaults, click Next, and click Install, and I'm finished. Okay, so now let's go ahead and create a blank database. I have a SQL Server instance out there I can use for that. So I'll go to Database, Create Blank SQL DB, and now I'll put in my SQL Server information. You would need an SA account in order to do this. You can use Windows or SQL Server authentication, but it does indeed need to be an SA account. And I'll say, I'll call the database install 2016. Now here's my SQL native client. That's the one I just installed. You already may have a 10 or 11 client installed, so you can check these. Click one and test your connection to make sure it's happy. Also at this point, if I want to, I can create a public account for that connection. So you wouldn't want to connect your clients using an SA, of course. So I'll create this public AccuTrack account. This is the password. I just made it the same, AccuTrack. And now I'll click Create Blank Database. And it'll go out and create that database name, and then it'll create all the tables I need and the structure, etc. Okay, so that's complete now. I'll go ahead and close that. And now I can immediately go to my database location. And I was in native mode. As I mentioned, when it first opens, it's in non-SQL mode, and it's pointing to this public folder that we create. Now we put the sample database out there just because we know we would normally have read-write access to that folder. Anyway, I'll go back and do database location SQL Server, and I'll put in my SQL Server information again. And I think I created an AccuTrack, so I'll use my public account that I just created, and then I'll pick my drop down and it'll give me a list of databases here in a little while. It may take a moment or two to populate. Okay, and I created a install 2016 database, so I'll pick that. Again, if I want to, I can test my connection, and now I'll click Save. And it says connection information saved. I must exit the application for changes to take effect. So I'll do that, close, and then exit completely. And it wants to back up my native database. I don't really care about doing that. Okay, so now let's go back and launch the program again. And again, it's in C, Program Files, x86, AccuSQL 2016. Or there'll be a shortcut on the desktop or from your Start menu. And now click the executable. And log in again with my ones and my new. But you can see there's a difference now. It doesn't say you're in native mode. I'm actually connected to a SQL Server database now. And I can verify that by going to my database location, and sure enough. Now this shared folder, this is not the database. This is a shared folder that has different uses. Things like if you're using local labs with an intake system, users share reports, so they create reports and share them with each other, auto updates to the system. There's various good reasons to create a shared folder that would be out on a server somewhere. And you would want to have read-write modify access to that folder and all the folders and files under it for whichever users are running AccuSQL. By default, again, it's just going to point to a public folder, but I would recommend it's probably a good idea to go ahead and create a public share out there on a server and then point your clients to it. Anyway, it's showing me that I'm pointing to my AccuSQL 2016 database here. And then I can remember I created a blank database, so if I go look, I have no students, I have no categories, activities, I have nothing whatsoever. So at this point, then I would begin doing my imports. Imports, probably of student information, classes, which would be your activities, and then your student registration, perhaps, if it's a tutoring center, probably. And the registration import links your students to your classes. If I close here and go to Database, Import, I've got a button down here that says Need Help, click here. So if I click on that, once you're ready to go with your imports, go ahead and read through this information. We have lots and lots of information about how you import, what's importable, what you need to do, including a webinar, a video on importing data, and even some sample import files. Okay, so that's about it.